I have both a story and a song for you. It's a story of a wrinkly boy who changed New England forever. It's the shocking tale of Merino Mania. Merinos are a breed of sheep with great wool. As we go on, I'll tell you all about what makes it so wonderful. They originated in Spain, and for a long time, it was forbidden to sell them because, of course, Spain wanted to keep a monopoly. In the 19th century, an American named William Jarvis came along and changed all that. Jarvis is a local boy from Boston. He was a diplomat, he was an international merchant. His career in diplomacy was up and down, but he had one astonishing success as a merchant, and that was in sheep. He was in the right place at the right time to make a killing sheep-wise. He was appointed the U.S. consul to Portugal in the early 1800s by then-President Thomas Jefferson, and around that time, the Napoleonic Wars broke out. Jarvis acquired a lot of merino sheep from Spain, just as Spain was being invaded by the French. Now, other people had imported merinos to the U.S. in ones and twos and small groups before that, but none had really taken off or been used for breeding. To give you some example of the awareness of what merino sheep could do, in the early 1800s, the first few merinos imported to Boston got slaughtered and eaten, because that was just what you did with sheep a lot of the time. They were for food as well as for fleece, and if you happened to turn some sheep into mutton, and they would have been a lot more valuable as fleece producers and breeders, oh, well, too late. One of the things that actually helped cause the War of 1812 was British embargoes on exports of their wool to the US. So Americans are longing for wool at this point. Any wool that you can grow in the US, producing it domestically, is going to be automatically valuable, but if it can be good quality wool, even better. And the sheep that the US has at this point are just okay as far as wool texture and length of fiber. Everyone's wild for something better. So there were a few small-scale sources, but no real explosion of merino until Jarvis did his huge investment. Not only does he use Spain's destabilization to acquire tremendous numbers of sheep, but he gifts some of them to President Madison and former President Jefferson with nice notes saying that he hopes they like the sheep. Then Jarvis buys a huge estate in Wethersfield, Vermont. He settles down there, he fills it with sheep, and also with professional Spanish shepherds and sheepdogs to take care of them. And he buys an interest in a woolen mill in Quechee, Vermont nearby, which is a real move in terms of enriching himself. Not only was he in the right place at the right time to acquire the sheep, but he's investing in the textile mills that are taking off all over the country at the same time as he owns raw materials to supply them. So Jarvis is profiting on multiple steps in the wool production process. When all this started, New England was partly clear-cut for farming, but not totally. And it had a lot of small farms. The merino boom is going to change all that. New England soil is mostly not great for plowing and sowing and raising crops. I don't want you to think it's all poor universally for farming. Fertile fields around rivers that experience some flooding have been farmed for crops by native New Englanders and post-colonial farmers, and they still have rich topsoil even today. But a lot of New England also has relatively poor soil, full of rocks and clay and on steep hillsides. These are areas where you would be hard put to it to grow the staple crops that, by and large, early American farmers wanted to eat. Wheat, oats, barley, and rye are what I'm thinking of. And I also don't want to leave you with the impression that the soil is like this because it's worn out. Maybe some areas are overfarmed and worn out, but for the most part, the land has just been like this since the glaciers came through and dropped a bunch of rocks and scraped off a bunch of topsoil. If you have to try and make a profit on a piece of land like that, maybe you, as the hypothetical farmer, go with it as it is and plant something that will do well on the land, like orchards, for example, that do well on hillsides, take a while to start returning your investment, maybe in 8 to 10 years, as friend of the show Johnny Appleseed could tell you. The sun and the rain and the appleseed. Or maybe you grimly plow and sow and reap on a diagonal slope in poor sandy soil, and grow your own vegetables and raise farm animals for your own use. Or then again, maybe you put all your eggs in one basket, as it were, and invest in an animal that will be so profitable it'll just mean that you can buy all the food and clothes and possessions that you'll ever need instead of having to put time into farming and making those too. So to examine the boom and then the bust of the Merino mania. The Merinos get brought in and bred with the existing flocks of sheep in Vermont, starting in about 1810, population skyrocketing through about 1824. And here's an example of a Merino ram, who is the tool for introducing Merino-ness to the flocks. You can see he's got a lot of extra skin. Merinos are bred to optimize the wool-growing areas on their bodies, and that means that all of them have some wrinkles. A lot of the early Merinos in New England were just covered in wrinkles, just piled up skin on fleece on fleece on fleece. So in Vermont by the year 1840, to give you some perspective on the numbers here, there were 1,681,000 sheep. That was 6 times the human population of the state. It just occurred to me that I should explain in case anybody is not familiar with farming or wool production. You don't kill the sheep to get the fleece. I just wanted to get that out there nice and early so that you'll be picturing this correctly. What you do if you're a sheep farmer is every year, usually in the spring, you take a skilled shearer who has a set of shears or an electric clipper these days, and the shearer shears the fleece off every sheep. It comes off in a great big, thick, bouncy sheet, and you roll it up in a bundle, and then you sell the fleece. The sheep is fine. The sheep just gets a nice buzz cut, and it's nice and cool, and it runs around naked all summer and grows the fleece back slowly in time for you to do the exact same thing the next year, and so over and over as long as the sheep lives. And this wool can command fantastic prices. You can sell merino for as much as $2 a pound. By comparison, any other kind of wool is selling for 37.5 cents a pound. So, let's examine why merino wool is so sexy. To begin with, the fibers are fine, much thinner than the wool everyone was used to in the pre-boom days. If you've touched some animal fibers lately, to give you some perspective, merino is just a little thicker than angora, about the same as cashmere, and every fiber is very long, making it possible to spin into a long, strong, thin thread. Also, each of those fibers has a crimped texture that traps pockets of air. And what is insulation but the process of trapping a lot of air? The crimping and the fineness also make it a natural wicking material, so it's breathable in hot weather. It keeps you dry, it keeps you cool, it keeps you warm. And it's naturally odor preventing, again because it's wicking and breathable. And it's not itchy, because of those long, thin, flexible, crimped fibers. That's important to the little kid I once was who could feel the end of every single fiber in her sweater sticking into her. To this day, merino is popular and worn all around the world and sold under much the same terms. Let's see an example. Darn Tough socks. I just checked and they are still made in Vermont. They are made with a blend of fibers, largely merino, and they are selling their socks on the moisture-wicking, thermoregulating, odor-resistant, itch-free, thin, breathable same set of recommendations. This is not product placement. I just like their socks. Although, darn tough, if you're listening, I would consider offers for corporate sponsorship. Also, a nice side effect is that merino wool, full of lanolin, that is a substance that sheep secrete in their fleece that's a natural detangler and waterproofer, and it helps their skin and wool stay healthy and not get chapped in the weather. Merino sheep in particular are just dripping with the stuff. It helps human skin stay healthy too. Again, I promise this is not product placement for Bag Bomb either, but I'm open to offers. So the Merino market changes the shape of farms. Farmers who had been growing crops and keeping a variety of livestock animals switch gears to be only Merino focused. There's gold in them thar sheep. The more sheep you keep, the more room you'll need for them to graze. So any farmer who can afford to buy more land does buy it, and the end effect is that where you had a lot of small farms, now whoever came out on top has one giant farm and everybody else is sold up. Maybe they go to the city. Cities are expanding in New England, it's the industrial era. But maybe they go out west to start over. More on that in a sec. So, much of New England is being clear-cut for sheep pastures. It was already cut to some extent of forests by the farms that existed, but even more so now, because you want great big fields for the sheep to graze, and then you need to put fences around those fields to keep the sheep in. And wood fences are great, but those wear out eventually. And wood's expensive and not as handy because, see above, New England being clear-cut for sheepies means that there isn't as much handy free timber. But you know what is handy and free and grows real well around here is rocks. Any farm would have had big piles of boulders they'd pulled out of their fields when plowing, so they could build it into stone walls to keep the sheep in. Much of New England at this point resembles the modern-day Yorkshire Dales. The stone walls in New England don't seem by and large to have been as solid or well-made as the ones in England, but I can definitely see the resemblance. So, these days, in the year of our Lord 2025, you'll notice that New England doesn't look like a sheep farm any longer. There are a lot of trees and wooded areas. Those are second-growth forest. By and large, there are precious few areas that weren't clear-cut for farms in general and for sheep in particular. In the 1840s, a pair of brothers named Bingham invested in merino sheep in Cornwall, Vermont. They had great names: Merrill Bingham and Alonzo Lycurgus Bingham. They made a tremendous profit, something like $43,000 over 8 years, and they did so well that they began breeding and shipping the sheep to the West Coast in 1859. The Binghams and the other sheep shippers would put the sheep on ships, sail them to Panama, have them herded across the Panama Isthmus, and put on another ship and sailed to California. And when the Transcontinental Railroad was built, they shipped them there on that. Now, if I was analyzing this in the form of a business proposal, I would look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the Merino business plan. So here's a couple of the threats. Remember that the soil is largely poor, hilly, and rock-filled in New England. We haven't completely overcome that problem just by going in for sheep. Fodder crops are still more expensive and difficult to grow to feed sheep well than they would be in a western state. So eventually your overhead in Vermont per sheep per year is calculated at something like $1 to $2 to keep the sheep fed. In the western states, for comparison, it's more like 25 cents per sheep per year. So the westward expansion of the US pretty quickly starts competing with Vermont farming. Another threat. The US isn't maintaining consistent tariffs on imported wool, so there's not a constant profit in growing domestic wool. Jarvis himself spent a lot of time and money and effort in his later years putting out publicity to call for more and stabler tariffs and lobbying politicians to support tariffs, but still the wool prices shot up and down and overall declined from about the 1830s onward. And by mid-century, a lot of farms had gone out of business and slaughtered or sold off their merinos. Around 1850, this song was written by John Godfrey Saxe, who is a humorous poet and a newspaper editor in Burlington, Vermont. First I'll sing it, then I'll do a little breakdown on the subtext for you. You've heard about the farmers who live among the hills, where every man's a sovereign and owns the land he tills, where all the girls are beautiful and all the boys are strong. 'Tis my delight from morn to night to sing a farmer's song. 'Tis here the tall and manly Green Mountain boys are seen, so called because the mountains and not the boys are green. They always fight to win the right or to resist the wrong. 'Tis my delight from morn to night to sing a farmer's song. 'Tis here the true Merino of pure imported stock is often seen to roam the green in many a noble flock. Their forms are large and beautiful, their wool is fine and long. 'Tis my delight from morn to night to sing a farmer's song. You've heard about the stories of ancient Rome and Greece, and Jason's expedition to find the golden fleece. Alonso's cut the fleece away and brought the sheep along. 'Tis my delight from morn to night to sing a farmer's song. A health unto the shearers and many happy years, who with a will and ready skill propel the eager shears. With heart sincere and conscience clear and voices loud and strong, 'tis my delight from morn to night to sing a farmer's song. Then here's the health of Bingham and all his shepherd kin. May heaven keep themselves and sheep till shearing comes again. And then may we be there to see and help the sport along. 'Tis my delight from morn to night to sing a farmer's song. You've heard about the farmers who live among the hills, where every man's a sovereign and owns the land he tills, where all the boys are beautiful and all the girls are strong. 'Tis my delight from morn to night to sing a farmer's song. I learned that from the singing of two folkies who I admire, Margaret MacArthur and Andy Davis, and it was Andy Davis who came up with the reversal in the last verse that I enjoy, so wanted to give credit where it's due. But about the song, it's nostalgia. It's all nostalgia, and some of it is current events, but also nostalgia in its own way. Those Green Mountain Boys, for example, they were the militia started by local hero Ethan Allen, and they disbanded after the American Revolution, so it had been a while. But at the time of the song, the Binghams and William Jarvis and a lot of other people were still making a killing on Merino. You could still do that in 1850, although increasingly the profitability was in breeding and selling the sheep out west or sending them overseas. But also it's nostalgia about small farm life. There weren't really a lot of small individual family farms, and that song makes it sound like you, the farming family, are going to shear your sheep and wear the wool from them and be self-sufficient. The real picture was that Vermont, like the rest of New England, was starting to have a lot of abandoned farms. And it wasn't because of industrialization. The woolen mills themselves were largely going out of business or being repurposed to manufacture something else. No, it was because a lot of farmers were ditching New England and moving out west to start over if they possibly could. Remember, the big farms expanded to eat the little ones. The people who sold up probably went west to try to acquire some land that they could grow crops on that wasn't packed with rocks, unlike the place they'd come from. That's getting us into the US westward expansion, and that is another story and will be told another time. Suffice it to say, a lot of the countryside went from being farms to being ghost towns and abandoned houses, and then woodland again eventually, and a lot of it's still like that to some extent. Merino did spike again briefly in popularity in Vermont in the 1860s because of the Civil War. The US Army wanted it to make uniforms out of. So the farmers who are still standing at this point are breeding lots of sheep again all of a sudden, and shearing them and commanding high prices for merino, because those Union soldiers needed moisture-wicking, thermo-regulating, odor-resistant uniforms that are itch-free. For the most part, other states and other countries by this time are outcompeting Vermont in the merino world. Looking at Vermont today, certainly a lot of the state is still farms, and some of those farms have merinos. But by and large, nobody is out there operating on the scale of the huge farms from the boom. One of the forgotten signs of the merino boom is that you'll see stone walls out in the woods. If you ever see a stone wall that's all mossy and tumbled down and out in the woods not really keeping anything in or out, maybe you'll see it out walking around or from the highway or from a train, that's likely the edge of what used to be an old field before the trees grew back all around it. And if it's an old field, it's likely to have been a field for merinos. As for William Jarvis, he died in 1859, and he has a merino sheep on his tombstone.
Baba, black sheep, have you any wool? Yes, sir, 3 bags full. 1 for the master, and 1 for the dame, and 1 for the little boy who lives down the lane.
I will launder your handkerchief after this. I am filling it with lanolin. Sorry.